What happens when two of television's most beloved personalities clash in a way nobody saw coming? When careful media training meets raw, unfiltered truth. When the cameras are rolling and there's nowhere to hide. Today, we're diving into the explosive confrontation that had everyone talking. The moment Trevor Noah was asked to leave Kelly Clarkson Show after things got heated in ways that shocked both the studio audience and viewers at home. Make sure to subscribe and drop your thoughts in the comments because this story has layers you won't believe. It started like any other interview. Kelly Clarkson, with her signature warmth and that disarming smile that's made her America's sweetheart, welcomed Trevor Noah to her iconic yellow couch. The comedian, author, and former Daily Show host settled in with his characteristic charm. That easy laugh that had endeared him to millions during his tenure as one of late night's most trusted voices. "Trevor, it's so great to have you here," Kelly began, her voice carrying that genuine enthusiasm that made guests feel instantly at ease. "I have to say, I've been following your journey since you left The Daily Show, and it's been incredible to watch you explore new creative territories." Trevor's response seemed standard at first. "Thank you, Kelly. It's been liberating in many ways. When you're doing a show like The Daily Show, you're constantly reacting to the news cycle, to what's happening in politics, to what people expect you to say about current events." But there was something in his tone, a slight edge that perhaps only the most attentive viewers might have caught. Kelly, seasoned interviewer that she is, picked up on it immediately. "That's interesting," she said, leaning forward slightly. "Because I think a lot of people, myself included, really valued that perspective you brought. The way you could take complex political situations and make them accessible, make them human." Trevor's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Right. But here's what I've been thinking about lately, Kelly. And maybe this is too honest for daytime television, but I think we need to talk about it." The studio audience, which had been murmuring appreciatively at the friendly banter, grew quieter. Even the production crew seemed to sense a shift in energy. "The thing is," Trevor continued, "we talk about making complex issues accessible. But what if we're actually doing the opposite? What if we're oversimplifying things to the point where we're not helping people understand? We're just helping them feel comfortable with not understanding?" Kelly's eyebrows raised slightly. This wasn't the direction she had expected the conversation to take, but she's nothing if not adaptable. "I'm not sure I follow. Can you give me an example?" "Well, let's talk about your show," actually, Trevor said, his tone still friendly, but with an underlying intensity that made everyone in the studio pay closer attention. "You have this amazing platform, this incredible reach. You interview politicians, celebrities, authors, activists, but when was the last time you really challenged someone? When was the last time you asked a follow-up question that made someone uncomfortable?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Kelly's media training kicked in, that smile never wavering. But those who knew her well could see the slight stiffening of her posture. "I think there's a difference between challenging someone and being respectful," she replied carefully. "My show is a place where people can come and feel safe to share their stories." "Safe for who, though?" Trevor pressed. "Safe for the guests or safe for the audience? Because sometimes the most important conversations are the uncomfortable ones." The studio audience was completely silent. Now, this wasn't the warm, fuzzy conversation they had come to expect from Kelly's show. This was something else entirely. Kelly took a breath, clearly recalibrating. "Trevor, I think you might be misunderstanding what we're trying to do here. We're not journalists in the traditional sense. We're entertainers. We're trying to brighten people's day to give them something positive." "But that's exactly my point," Trevor said, his voice rising slightly. "We hide behind this idea of entertainment, of positivity, of not wanting to make waves. Meanwhile, the world is literally falling apart around us." "I wouldn't say the world is falling apart," Kelly interjected, her own voice taking on a slightly defensive tone for the first time. "Wouldn't you?" Trevor leaned forward now, matching her earlier posture. "Kelly, you grew up in Texas, right? Small town, working-class family. You know what struggle looks like. You know what it means when people don't have access to health care? When they're working 3 jobs just to keep the lights on." "Of course I do," Kelly replied, her voice steady, but with an edge creeping in. "That's exactly why I want to create a space that uplifts people, that reminds them there's good in the world." "But what if that uplift is just another form of denial?" Trevor asked. "What if we're so busy telling people to look on the bright side that we're ignoring the very real darkness that needs to be addressed?" The conversation was escalating in a way that neither host nor guest had anticipated, and you could feel the tension radiating from the stage to every corner of the studio. Kelly's jaw tightened visibly. For someone who had built her career on being relentlessly positive, on being the person who could find silver linings in any cloud, Trevor's words felt like a direct attack on everything she stood for. "What, Trevor?" she said, her voice still controlled, but with steel underneath. "I think you're being incredibly unfair. You're sitting here on my show using my platform to essentially tell me and my audience that we're part of the problem." "I'm not saying you're part of the problem," Trevor replied, though his tone suggested otherwise. "I'm saying we all are. I'm saying I was part of the problem, too. Do you know how many times I made jokes about serious issues because it was easier than actually dealing with them? That's your guilt to carry," Kelly shot back, surprising everyone, including herself, with the sharpness of her response. "Don't project that onto the rest of us." The audience was completely captivated. Now, this wasn't just a disagreement. This was two worldviews colliding in real time, and neither host nor guest seemed willing to back down. Trevor sat back slightly, a sardonic smile playing at his lips. "Guilt, Kelly. This isn't about guilt. This is about responsibility. You have 12 million viewers. 12 million people who tune in to see what Kelly Clarkson thinks, what she values, who she platforms. And I take that responsibility seriously," Kelly fired back. "Which is why I choose to use that influence to spread joy, to celebrate people's achievements, to remind people that there are good things happening in the world." "But whose achievements are you celebrating?" Trevor pressed. "Which people are you reminding that good things exist? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're mostly talking to people who already have it pretty good." Kelly's eyes flashed. "That is completely unfair, and you know it. I've had people on this show who have overcome incredible odds. People who have faced real hardship. And then what?" Trevor asked. "You celebrate their resilience. You tell them how inspiring they are. And then you send them back to the same broken systems that created their hardship in the first place. What have me do?" Kelly's voice was rising now, her famous composure beginning to crack. "Single-handedly fix every systemic problem in America during a 1-hour television show. I'd have you acknowledge that those systems exist," Trevor replied without missing a beat. "I'd have you ask the hard questions. When you interview a politician, don't just ask them about their family and their hobbies. Ask them why their policies consistently benefit the wealthy while leaving working families behind. You think I don't know how to interview people?" Kelly's voice was sharp now, any pretense of her usual warmth completely gone. "You think I got to where I am by asking softball questions? I think you got to where you are by making people comfortable," Trevor replied. "And there's nothing wrong with that, but comfortable people don't change systems. Uncomfortable people do." Kelly stood up abruptly, something that never happened during interviews. The action was so unexpected that even the camera operators seemed momentarily confused, scrambling to adjust their shots. "You know what makes me uncomfortable, Trevor?" she said, looking down at him. "Someone coming onto my show and essentially calling me complicit in everything that's wrong with the world." Trevor remained seated, but his posture was defiant. "If that makes you uncomfortable, maybe you should sit with that feeling instead of running from it." "I'm not running from anything," Kelly said, her voice now carrying the full force of years of media training being abandoned in favor of raw honesty. "I'm standing up to someone who thinks being cynical makes him superior." "Cynical?" Trevor laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Kelly, I'm not cynical. I'm realistic." "There's a difference, is there?" Kelly shot back. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've decided that anyone who chooses hope over despair, anyone who chooses to focus on solutions rather than problems is somehow naive or complicit." "I never said you were naive," Trevor replied, finally standing to match her posture. "I said you were comfortable, and comfort is the enemy of progress." The two stood facing each other now, the physical distance between them minimal, but the ideological chasm enormous. The studio audience watched in stunned silence as two of their favorite personalities engaged in what was clearly no longer a typical daytime television interview. "You want to talk about comfort?" Kelly's voice was steady but intense. "Let's talk about the comfort of sitting in judgment of other people's choices. Let's talk about the comfort of criticism without action." "What action would you suggest?" Trevor asked. "What exactly are you doing with your platform besides making people feel good about a world that should make them angry?" "I'm giving people hope," Kelly replied fiercely. "I'm showing them that despite everything that's wrong, there are still reasons to believe in humanity. Still reasons to keep fighting." "Fighting for what, though?" Trevor pressed. "Fighting to maintain the status quo. Fighting to keep people just happy enough that they don't demand real change." Kelly's hands were trembling slightly now, though whether from anger or emotion was unclear. You think hope is the enemy of change. You think joy is incompatible with justice. I think false hope is worse than honest despair, Trevor replied, his voice quiet but cutting. At least despair motivates people to act. The words hung between them like a gauntlet thrown down, and for a moment neither spoke. The silence stretched until it became almost unbearable, filled only by the quiet hum of studio equipment and the barely audible breathing of a captivated audience. Kelly's face went completely pale at those words. For someone who had built her entire brand, her entire worldview around the power of hope and positivity, hearing it called false hope, hearing it compared unfavorably to despair was like a physical blow. That she said, her voice barely above a whisper, but somehow more powerful than any shout, is the most cynical, destructive thing I have ever heard anyone say on television. Trevor's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Sometimes destruction is necessary for reconstruction. Whose destruction? Trevor. Kelly's voice was growing stronger, fueled by a righteous anger that seemed to surprise even her. Because the people who watch my show, the people who need that hope you're so quick to dismiss, they're not the ones with the power to reconstruct anything. They're the ones trying to survive. And maybe that's the problem, Trevor replied. Maybe we've convinced people that survival is enough, that getting by is the best they can hope for. No, Kelly said firmly, pointing at him. Now, you don't get to stand there and tell people that their hope is false, that their joy is misguided, that their choice to find light in darkness is somehow wrong. I'm not telling them their joy is wrong, Trevor said, his voice rising to match hers. I'm telling you that your platform could be used for more than just validation. Validation, Kelly's voice cracked with indignation. You think that's what I do? You think validation is somehow less important than your brand of intellectual superiority? The studio audience was completely transfixed. Many had their phones out recording what was clearly becoming one of the most intense moments in daytime television history. Kelly, Trevor said, his tone shifting slightly, as if he was beginning to realize how far this had gone. I'm not trying to attack you personally. Yes, you are, she cut him off. That's exactly what you're doing. You're attacking me. You're attacking my show. You're attacking my audience. And you're doing it all while pretending to be intellectually superior. Trevor ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that betrayed his own growing discomfort with the situation. Look, maybe I came on too strong, but these are important conversations that need to be had. Not like this, Kelly said, her voice carrying the weight of years of experience in television, years of understanding how to connect with people. Not by tearing down everything someone else has built, not by dismissing the very real good that hope and positivity can do in people's lives, but what about the very real harm that false optimism can cause? Trevor shot back, seemingly unable to let it go. What about the people who are told to think positive while they're being exploited, who are told to be grateful while they're being oppressed? Kelly stared at him for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was deadly calm. Trevor, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Do you actually believe that my show, that my choice to focus on positivity and hope, is somehow responsible for systemic oppression? Trevor opened his mouth to respond, then closed it. The question hung in the air, and for the first time since the interview began, he seemed uncertain. Because if that's what you believe, Kelly continued, if you honestly think that choosing joy over cynicism, that celebrating human resilience, that giving people a break from the constant barrage of negativity they face every day, if you think that makes me complicit in oppression, then you and I have nothing more to talk about. Kelly, I don't think you're personally responsible for systemic oppression, Trevor said, his voice quieter now. But I do think that platforms like yours could do more to address it. Could do more, Kelly repeated, nodding slowly. You know what, Trevor? You're absolutely right. I could do more. We all could do more. But the difference between us is that I'm not going to tear down what I have built in service of some theoretical better version of myself. She walked back to her desk now, but instead of sitting down, she placed both hands on it and leaned forward, looking directly into the camera. You know what I think the problem is? She said, addressing not just Trevor, but the entire viewing audience. I think we've gotten so obsessed with being right, with having the perfect political opinion, with taking the most intellectually defensible position that we've forgotten how to actually help people. Trevor shifted uncomfortably. Kelly, that's not what I'm saying, isn't it? She turned back to him. Because you've spent the last 20 minutes telling me that everything I do is wrong, that hope is false, that positivity is harmful, that my audience is somehow being misled. But what have you offered as an alternative? What concrete thing have you suggested that would actually make anyone's life better? The question landed like a punch. Trevor stood there, clearly struggling to formulate a response that would justify the intensity of his criticism. I'm suggesting that we have more honest conversations, he said finally. Kelly gestured between them. This is your idea of an honest conversation. This combative, superior, tear everything down approach. This is what you think will help people. The studio was so quiet you could have heard a pin drop. Even the production crew had stopped moving. Everyone transfixed by what was unfolding. Kelly walked over to where Trevor was standing. And when she spoke, her voice was firm and final. Trevor, I think you should leave. The words hit the studio like a thunderbolt. Guests didn't get asked to leave the Kelly Clarkson Show. It just didn't happen. Trevor's eyes widened. Kelly, come on. No, she said, shaking her head. I've given you 20 minutes to make your point, and your point seems to be that everything I do is wrong and harmful. I'm not going to give you my platform to continue tearing down what I've spent years building. I'm not trying to tear anything down, Trevor protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Yes, you are, Kelly replied. And the worst part is you're doing it in the name of intellectual honesty. As if being destructive somehow makes you more authentic than being constructive. She gestured toward the exit. I'm asking you to leave. Not because I can't handle criticism. Not because I'm afraid of difficult conversations. But because this isn't a conversation anymore. This is just you using my show as a platform to demonstrate your intellectual superiority, and I won't be part of that. Trevor stood there for a moment, clearly weighing his options. The cameras were still rolling. The audience was watching, and the entire situation had spiraled far beyond what anyone had anticipated. Finally, he nodded slowly. Okay, he said quietly. I'll go. As he walked toward the exit, Kelly called. After him, Trevor. For what it's worth, I hope you find a way to channel that passion into something constructive instead of just tearing down other people's work. He paused at the edge of the stage, turned back one last time, and for a moment, it looked like he might say something. Instead, he simply nodded and walked away, leaving Kelly standing alone on her stage. Her audience in stunned silence and millions of viewers at home trying to process what they had just witnessed. Kelly turned back to the camera, took a deep breath, and when she spoke, her voice was steady and clear. We'll be right back, she said, and the show cut to commercial. What do you think about this explosive confrontation? Was Trevor right to challenge Kelly's approach, or did he cross the line? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more stories that dive deep into the moments that shocked the entertainment world.